What's up, Bible Boot Camp? We're back at it with our weekly look at the world's greatest book, written and authored by the greatest writer in the known universe. And you can check 2 Timothy 3:16 if you want to learn more about that. This week we got Revelation chapter 5, the Lamb and the Scroll, maybe the most monumental moment in the entire Bible. It's an incredible chapter with three main goals. 1, what is the scroll and why does it matter so much? 2, what makes opening it the most climactic moment in human history? And 3, what happens when it's opened? So I talked about last time how the book of Revelation spans so much time. Like when you start chapter 1, you're in the first century. It's the early church. But then we've covered 2,000 years. We're going to get into the tribulation, then into the 1,000-year millennial reign, then into eternity. So there's just so much time there. So this is the timeline I've been using for you guys. And using the cross as a reference point, we've got the 7 letters, which I believe also represent the 7 eras in church history. And I think we are in the Matthew 24 part, that beginning of sorrows. We haven't got to this event yet known as the rapture. So wherever you want to place the rapture on your timeline, we haven't gotten there yet. I think we're getting closer. And we're in Revelation chapter 4 and 5, which is John in heaven. But I'm going to shrink this down a bit so you can get a perspective of where we've been, but also where we're going. So chapter 4 and 5 basically represents the end of the church age, but also a precursor to what's going to be known as the tribulation. It'll be a 7-year period of time that's split in half. The last 3.5 years is what's known as the Great Tribulation. And then, of course, we'll get to the second coming and all that. So that's coming down the road. So we're going to look at chapter 5 tonight. Before we do, quick recap of last time. And in case you missed it, I'll post a video link in the video description below. You can catch up on our entire Revelation playlist. Okay, here's what happened. John gets caught up to heaven. That word caught up. Many believe Revelation 4:1 is the rapture verse. He's caught up in the Spirit. He ascends into the throne room. And he gives a description of it. And what's fascinating is his description of the throne room, as you study this and others, the tabernacle. That's right. Moses up on Mount Sinai, 10 commandments. He comes down. He not only brings down the 10 commandments, but he also brings down essentially blueprints, a physical description of how to remake the throne room of heaven here on earth. The tabernacle is a model of the throne room. And the more you study this, the more you'll realize what the throne of God is like. And also everything in there points to Jesus Christ. Also, in the throne room, there are groups of people. So we have in there angels. We also have the 4 living creatures, which are also angels, but cherubim, seraphim, whatever you want to describe them as. But then we have a group called the 24 elders. And here's what we know about the 24 elders. They are sitting on thrones, which is what Jesus promised the church. They are wearing white raiment, which is what Jesus promised the church. They are wearing crowns, which is what Jesus promised the church. They're singing songs of the redeemed, which is what the church will do. So do they represent the church? Well, yeah, but you have to make your own determination on that. Don't believe me. Study it. Come to your own conclusion. There's brilliant people on both sides of this argument. One other thing, though, these 24 elders, they lay their crowns down. Something to think about. And that's how chapter 4 ended, and that sets us up for chapter 5, the Lamb and the Scroll. And I think you'll see as we get into this, this is the most climactic moment in all of human history, right here. Verse 1, Then I saw on the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed 7 seals. Now this is interesting because it's during this period of time, like right after the gospel to 95 AD when John's writing this, that it's an era in human history where writings went from being on scrolls to being placed into what's called a codex, which is kind of like the first generation of a book that we know to be. But most, especially like the whole New Testament, was written on scrolls. Here's what's interesting. Scrolls made of papyrus. It had a rough edge on the back that you couldn't write on it. Now notice John describes this scroll as written on the front and the back. It was 8 by 10 sheets and written in 3-inch columns. And just give you perspective of this, the New Testament was obviously written in scrolls. Jude, 2nd and 3rd John, and Philemon are all just one sheet. Romans was 11.5 feet long. The book of Mark, or the Gospel of Mark, was 19 feet long. John was 23.5 feet long. The Gospel of Matthew was 30 feet long. Luke and Acts, 32-foot long scrolls. Think about this. And the book we are reading, Revelation, was a 15-foot long scroll. So that kind of gives you a perspective of what we're dealing with. And by the way, they would use these scrolls not just for books, but also for legal documents, government records, and so forth. You kind of see how they would roll it, flatten it up, fold it into thirds, and then it was strung together and then clay stamped to make a seal. And the one we're looking at has 7 seals. And remember, these scrolls had a rough edge on the back that you couldn't write on. Notice here, John describes it. It's in the right hand of him who sat on the throne, a scroll with writing on both sides, and was sealed with 7 seals, not just 1. Remember, John is describing, this is in the right hand of him who is on the throne. We're going to talk about that in a second. And there's writing on both sides, and it doesn't just have 1 seal, it has 7 seals. But before we get into this scroll and why it matters so much to you and I want to take you back to a scroll in the Bible, and I think this will help you understand why this means so much. This Jeremiah scroll, Jeremiah 36, says, at that time, the Lord sent me a message. He said, your cousin Hanamel, son of Shalom, will come and say to you, buy my field at Anathoth. By law, you have the right to buy it before it is offered to anyone else. Now, just to set the scene here, this is the end of a nation. And God's already said, Babylon is coming. They're my instrument of judgment. They're going to wipe out the nation. They're going to take a remnant over into Babylon for 70 years into captivity. Most will die over there. But right before this happens, he's going to have Jeremiah buy up some land. Then, just as the Lord had said he would, my cousin Hanamel came and visited me in the prison. He said, please buy my field at Anathoth in the land of Benjamin. By law, you have the right to buy it before it is offered to anyone else. So buy it for yourself. Then I knew that the message I had heard was from the Lord. So I bought the field at Anathoth, paying Hanamel 17 pieces of silver for it. I signed and sealed the deed of purchase before witnesses, weighed out the silver, and paid him. Then I took the sealed deed and an unsealed copy of the deed, which contained the terms and conditions of the purchase, and I handed them to Barak, son of Nora and grandson of Messiah. I did all this in the presence of my cousin Hanamel. The witnesses had signed the deed, and all the men of Judah who were there in the courtyard of the guardhouse. So just to recap, you've got, this is dealing with the purchase of land for future redemption. I want you to keep that in mind. Even though Jeremiah would never return, it was God's promise the land would return to them. So it's going to stay within the family. That's why before he clears Israel out, he wants Jeremiah to buy up this particular piece of land. And then 70 years later, his descendants can come. And if they meet all the terms and conditions, that's the key thing, then they could regain the land. Now you may be asking, like, what's this got to do with Revelation chapter 5? Well, let's go back to it. He sees a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll? So that's why this angel is saying, who is worthy to break the seals? Who meets the terms and conditions? Verse 3, but no man in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. Then I began to weep bitterly because no man was found worthy to open the scroll or even look inside it. See, it had to be a kinsman of Adam. And if I lost you there, think about this. Back in Genesis, God created the heavens and the earth. Who was the earth given to? Adam. Adam was given dominion over all the earth. He was sinless. He was blameless. He was a perfect creation of God. Sound familiar? And then he sinned and he lost all of it. Now, who runs the world now? It's not Jesus Christ yet. It is Satan. Satan is the god of this world. He's the prince of the power of the air. Currently, when Jesus undergoes his 3 temptations, one of those temptations, Satan takes him up on a high place and shows him all the earth, all the nations and empires. And he says, you see all this? This is all mine, and I can give it to anyone I want, and I'll give it to you if you bend the knee. That was one of his temptations. It's not a temptation unless it's true. So that's why we pray thy kingdom come, because Jesus will come back to redeem this land from who has dominion over it right now. Does that make sense? So that's what's going on here. And back to verse 4, this is why John writes, then I began to weep bitterly because no man was found worthy to open the scroll or even look inside it. What man is worthy to walk up to God in the throne room and say, I am worthy to grab the scroll? Nobody. That's why it says he sobbed convulsively. This is why this is the most climactic moment in human history, I believe. So what we have is a mystery thriller happening right now. There is a sealed scroll in the right hand of God. A man is sought out to open it. It must be a kinsman of Adam, must meet the qualifications, and this is the title deed to the earth that Adam lost and Jesus Christ purchased. And what's interesting is they search for someone in three places: heaven, earth, and under the earth. And I'll let you figure out what that means. But if you're confused, John was not confused. He understood fully what was happening and he sobbed convulsively. So you've got this really incredible moment right here where basically here on earth, the powers of darkness have been running wild. Who can step up to the plate, meets the qualifications to redeem the land? I mentioned it's a mystery. Here's what's so amazing about this book. All the answers to the mysteries are found somewhere else in the Bible. And amazingly, the answer to this mystery is found in the Old Testament in a little book known as the Book of Ruth. And if you've never done a deep dive on the Book of Ruth, do yourself a favor and do that. It is one of the greatest books of prophecy in the Bible, and it's probably the most important book in the Old Testament for the church. So I'll sum it up like this. You got three main characters. You've got Naomi, who is a Jew. She gets exiled from the land. You have Ruth, who is a Gentile who has no access to God or the land. And then you have Boaz, who is a Jew, but will bring redemption to both Naomi, the Jew, and Ruth, the Gentile, through grace. And the quick synopsis of the book is this. You have Naomi, who's a Jew. She's also a type of Israel. Just like Israel, she will be exiled from the land. In exile, her husband dies. They owned land in Israel. So when he dies, how does Naomi get her husband's land? Well, it goes to the closest relative, the nearest of kin, someone called the kinsman redeemer, who can step up and redeem the land for Naomi. Okay? This is called the law of redemption, and Naomi can gain access back to the land through the nearest of kin. The other law at play here is something called the law of levirate marriage, where Ruth will gain her own redemption and salvation through the kinsman redeemer Boaz. Now, what about this kinsman redeemer? Okay, there's four qualifications to be the Goel or kinsman redeemer to redeem the land. One, he had to be the nearest of kin. Two, he had to be able to perform all the duties of the kinsman redeemer. Three, he had to be willing to do it. And four, he had to take on all obligations that came with it. So there's actually someone closer to Naomi, a closer relative, than Boaz. Boaz is not the closest relative. There's a nearer kinsman. He would have to invest his own money to redeem the land from Naomi's dead husband. So it would cost him something. Second, he would also have to marry Ruth. And if there was a son produced through them, that son would legally be the son of Naomi's dead husband, and he would be the one to inherit the property. The kinsman would end up losing both the property and the money he put down for it. So on top of that, not only would the son inherit the land redeemed, but also part of the kinsman's property. The kinsman would be depriving his own heirs. So there's not a lot of financial benefit to this. This is why, if you're looking at it financially, you're like, not a good deal. But if you look at it romantically, you may see it otherwise. So when you get to chapter 4 of Ruth, Boaz is fully aware of what is going on and all that's happening. He knows that he's not the nearest kinsman. And so he approaches this nearer kinsman and says, on the day you buy the land from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabitess, you acquire the dead man's widow in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. At this, the kinsman redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it because it might endanger my own estate. I tell you what, Boaz, you redeem it yourself. I cannot do it. And everybody stands up and cheers because Boaz saves the day. So there's a multi-dimensional aspect to the book of Ruth. Yes, just on a human level, you got three individuals, but each of those individuals are a type of something. Naomi is a type of Israel, and her path in the book, being exiled, coming back into the land, is the same path that Israel will take. Ruth, her path is the same as the church. She's a Gentile with no access to God or the land, and she gains access through grace from the kinsman redeemer, who is Boaz, who is a Jew, but also plays this messianic role. So it's interesting. In order to bring Ruth to Naomi, Naomi had to be exiled from her land. And that's very much similar to Israel and the church. What the law could not do, grace did. The law ended up not saving Naomi or Ruth. It was the grace of the kinsman redeemer, Boaz. Ruth does not replace Naomi. The church does not replace Israel. Ruth learns of Boaz's ways through Naomi, just like the church learns of Jesus through Israel. Why? Because Jesus was a Jew. The first believers were Jews. It was through that the church was even born. And this is interesting. Naomi meets Boaz through Ruth. Naomi knew of Boaz, but she had never met Boaz, but she met him through Ruth. And could it be that Israel, who knows of Jesus Christ, will come to know Jesus Christ through the church? And one of the big keys to the book is no matter how much Boaz loved Ruth, he had to wait until Ruth made the first move, and that kind of describes our salvation. And that brings us back to this moment here we have in heaven, where in the right hand of God there is a scroll, a title deed to the earth, and who meets the qualifications to be the kinsman redeemer? Verse 5, then one of the elders said to me, do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals. One of the things I want you to be aware of is the first 3 chapters of Revelation, very churchy, very Christianese. A lot of titles we're very familiar with. From chapter 4 and 5 onward, this is going to read like an Old Testament book. It's going to sound very Jewish. Look at these descriptions of Jesus here. The Lion of the tribe of Judah, talking about the 12 tribes of Judah. He's the root of David. That's not ones we kind of use a lot within the church. Verse 6, then I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain. That's interesting. Standing in the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. He had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. So this brings up this interesting dynamic between the lion and the lamb. 2 vastly different animals, by the way. But these titles of Jesus, they're all going to be Jewish titles from here on out. Lamb, never mentioned in the 7 churches' letters. You know, in the first 3 chapters, there's all these titles of Jesus Christ. A lot of them in chapter 1, and they're used for the letters to the churches. Him being referenced as the Lamb, not one time, but you're going to see that more and more as we go on. So the Lamb represents his first coming. He's the Passover Lamb, the sacrificial Lamb, the Lamb whose blood paid the price for everyone's sins. What about the Lion? The Lion represents his second coming. And this is part of the blindness with the Jews because they confused his second coming with his first coming. They were not expecting the suffering servant, the sacrificial lamb. They were expecting the lion who will come to conquer. Verse 7, he came and took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne. And when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. Verse 9, and they sang a new song. You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slain. And with your blood you purchased men for God from every tribe and language and people and nation. And here's the classic King James Version. I want to show you this. Same verse. It says, thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof. For thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to God by thy blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation. Notice it says, you have redeemed who? Us. Now, I try not to debate translations. Everyone's got their favorite one, and whatever translation you like. You know, I think at a really base level, as long as you're in Scripture, I know I've got my favorite ones. I've got 2 translations that are just my favorite, neither one of which is the King James. However, I respect the KJV. And here's the one problem I have with modern translations. They have translated this word, us, into men. And it reads different. I'm going to show you this. And this is the 24 elders singing this. And has redeemed us. You have redeemed us to God by thy blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation, and has made us unto our God kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth forever. Now, what I want to do is to challenge you to do a little bit of research on this. For centuries, this was translated, the 24 elders singing, "You have redeemed us by thy blood. You have made us into kings and priests." Now, why is this so important? Because the 24 elders are already there in heaven. When he, talking about Jesus Christ, starts to open these seals, the wrath of God begins. That's the tribulation. The tribulation can't begin until the seals are broken. The seals can't be broken until the Lamb takes the book, and the Lamb can't take the book until the 24 elders lay down their crowns. So it goes back to what we've been talking about. I think your view of the 24 elders at least influences your view of the church right now. Either the church is preparing for the rapture, or the church should be preparing for tribulation. Verse 11, "Then I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands, and then 1,000 times 10,000. They encircled the throne and the living creatures and the elders. In a loud voice they sang, 'Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise.' Then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea, and all that is in them singing, 'To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honor and glory and power forever and ever.' The 4 living creatures said, 'Amen,' and the elders fell down and worshiped." So within chapter 5, you get a lot of hymn songs. Multiple songs are being sung. You could honestly kind of do a study of just the songs they're singing in heaven. What I believe is the church singing in heaven. But that brings us now to the end of chapter 5, and it brings us to the end of a section, which has been a little bit of a precursor to what's going to happen next. So next week, I want you to complete the Lamb and the Scroll worksheet. I'll post the link in the video description below. I want you to read Revelation chapter 6. And as a bonus, I want you to go back and read Matthew 24 and 25. This is Jesus' Olivet Discourse. It's essentially his overview of the book of Revelation on those 2 chapters. So check that out, and we will be back next week for Revelation chapter 6. Until then, always remember Romans 8:28.